Mark, we're here to talk about your book, obviously. I've got your two other books, Evidence of Eternity and what's the first title of the first one?
Never letting
Never
go.
Letting Go. That's the one. We got that. I think they've been translated into different languages as well now. Um, but we spoke all 5 years we've started communicating together when this first all happened to you, and it's been a journey for you. What I would say from a medium to the celebrity status where we sing you on Good Morning Dallas, Coast to Coast AM, fabulous Coast to Coast AM. You've studied in the UK, and I think you went to Arthur Findlay College as well to do some stuff.
I did.
How has the progression been for you from those early days to where you are now?
That it's really been quite amazing because Mike, people ask about your journey in life. For me, it wasn't like a door opened. It's like they got flown open and I got shoved right through it. And it has just been amazing to go from, I put out my first book, Never Letting Go, as a guide,
Yeah,
a journey through grief, but how spirits can help us. And then I started getting asked to be on television and radio, like you indicated. It's it's been very humbling and very rewarding.
yeah,
And then also there are people who think that because we're mediums that we somehow are all knowing and all seeing. And I was quoted on TV saying, "Look, I'm a medium. I'm not the Messiah." So that's what I keep. It's like it's nice to have the venue and the platform
yeah.
to spread the understanding about spirit communication. So I think that has been the most amazing change
Right.
is being able to be heard by people.
Yeah. And do you still do work? Is it Aquarian Dreams? I used to love those little podcasts that you give there. Are you still around doing stuff
Oh,
there?
well, everything that I'm doing these days during the pandemic has been through Zoom
Right.
conferences. Like I just recently spoke at the International Association for
Yeah.
Near-Death Studies. I
Yeah.
was the keynote speaker on September 3rd, which is a Friday night. I'm also a speaker for the Theosophical Society. I'm also on the Shift Network, and then I do a
Brilliant.
live stream show every Thursday called The Psychic and the Doc.
Right.
And so basically everything's shifted over to virtual events,
Yeah.
which thank goodness for the miracle of modern technology.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you find your readings through Zoom or Skype? Because some mediums I know don't get along with it. I do.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this?
Well, you get it, Mike.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you understand it. Well, that's a good question because that's one of the things that I bring up in my new book, The Afterlife Frequency, because spirits are pure electromagnetic energy.
Yeah.
And I developed a term in my book called the electromagnetic soul. And I know a number of scientists have already started using the term, the EMS, because the ones who endorsed the new book. And what I mean by the EMS, that's what we really are.
Yeah.
Our soul is pure electromagnetic energy, which is eternal consciousness. And the reason that I'm explaining that is because readings on telephone, Skype, Zoom are just as accurate as
Yeah.
in-person readings because spirits are able to move at the same speed
Yeah.
as light, which
Right.
is the same speed as the radio waves, the microwaves, gamma rays, everything that is making your podcast broadcast worldwide moves at the speed of light,
Yeah.
and so do spirits. So once you realize that it was funny because the first gallery event. I guess in the UK call it platform
Yeah.
work. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Same thing. So there was like 300 people there. It was an event for Helping Parents Heal. Beautiful organization. And I'm like, gee, I've never done this on Zoom. And boom.
Yeah.
Once I got used to finding the person in the sea of little
Yeah.
thumbnails,
Yeah.
it was the same as standing in front of a crowd of people.
Right.
And that to me once again proved my theory of the electromagnetic soul.
Right. Super. Because you've become quite known now for bridging the gap, as it were, between spirituality and science. I know Greg Braden does a bit. He does it in a different way. For me, I'm still a bit old school. I see spirit in the way I was taught, and you've got to do this massive research, and you talk about the speed of which they travel.
Right.
And of course, you know as well as I do that when we see these messages, sometimes it's going shum shum shum, and you've got to grab one out of the air,
Yeah.
and then the whole thing slows down once you've grabbed one. So the question is that when we go over to the other side, and we speed up in that frequency, the information we bring back, if somebody wants to connect with us in the spirit world, is really just a memory link, because we're really at such a faster speed now, aren't we? And we're in
Right.
that big world of collective consciousness.
Right.
So the question is, are we really that person, the essence of that person, once we cross over?
Once we're communicating with the spirit,
Yeah,
what's happening? This is my theory. Okay, everything is. This is where I meld faith and science. All right, in the realms of faith, the soul, the spirit, is believed to pre-exist the body, come into the body, and then when we die, leave the body. So we're not these bodies; we're just these vessels.
yeah,
And in quantum physics, we know that everything's made of molecules, which in turn are made of atoms, which in turn are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons, which in turn are made of a smaller unit on the most basic level of called a quantum,
right,
which is electromagnetic energy. Ergo, everything on the subatomic level is electromagnetic energy, which is fascinating because in the realm of science, biology, the study of organic living beings, and physics, the study of inorganic matter, have always been put in two different camps. But now we know on the subatomic level, everything's electromagnetic energy.
yeah,
So when you get to that level, the distinction no longer exists. And so with the electromagnetic soul, what's happening, Mike, is that we know also from physics that everything has a vibration. In other words, this pen is vibrating on a subatomic level, even though it may appear stationary. So are you and I. So are the radio waves transmitting your show. So are the nuclear reactions within the sun. I mean, when you start thinking about this, it really gets mind-boggling. So what's happening is the electromagnetic soul of our brain. We're adjusting our brainwave frequency to a higher level. So let's say we live in AM, the other side's on FM, and we get a frequency match. So we're not becoming that spirit or collective when we're communicating with the collective consciousness. What we're doing is we're aligning with them, and they're transmitting waves of information that their electromagnetic impulses interface with our brain's electromagnetic soul, and then it gets converted into recognizable concepts based on our memories, feelings, and cultural associations.
right.
And so oftentimes we will see, hear, smell, taste, feel things. I mean, and I know that you've experienced this. When you communicate with the soul of somebody who died, and you're communicating maybe to their parent, okay, maybe a parent who's lost a child, and you feel that surge of love coming through you, you know, that the love of this child for a parent or whoever it is. We also will feel sensations how the person died.
Yeah.
Now, we're not becoming them because obviously, we're not being bludgeoned in the head or dying of congestive heart failure or whatever it is. So that's my explanation for that question.
Right. And how do you reconcile people, for example, this all omnipotent God, this energy, this life force. Like yourself, as a brought up a Catholic, we were always taught of this man there sitting there with his thing and ready to write in the book everything we've done wrong or everything we've done good. It's very difficult for some people. I think this is what scares people
Yeah.
about passing, that suddenly we're energy. We can see and talk and do all this, but we have no body. The God that we've admired and revered doesn't exist in a physical form. Or could it be that when we pass, because that's the image that we have, until we settle in the spirit world, that's the image that will be presented to us? Is that fair to say?
Yes. People say that we're created in God's image. Well, I have a hard time believing that, God's a higher order bipedal primate.
Yeah,
And it's, I love when you said that this man, there's this image that God's this neurotic
yeah,
Caucasian man sitting on a
yeah,
throne with a
yeah,
scepter, being jealous and
yeah,
smiting. And in defense of religious people, understanding infinity is something that the organ that we call the brain, a carbon 12 and salt resonator, essentially floating in water. All right. It's a hard drive. Who and
yeah,
what we are is the electromagnetic soul, the programs on the hard drive. But our brain is not designed, while we're encapsulated in it, to
yeah,
perceive infinity, because everything we know has a beginning, a middle, and an end,
yeah,
including us. And so it's much easier to anthropomorphize God, to create a white king sitting on a throne,
yeah,
or in Asia, perhaps Lord Shiva, or
yeah,
into other religions. And you see this also in near-death experiences. So people who are Christian and have a near-death experience and encounter, say they've encountered Jesus, but people in India who have an NDE describe encountering Shiva, Vishnu, Krishna,
yeah, yeah,
Lakshmi,
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
deities there. People in Japan talk about Amarasu, the goddess of
yeah,
love and mercy. And so my theory on that is that God is infinity. What
yeah,
Nikola Tesla said is that one man calls, or one person calls God, another calls the laws of physics. This is
right,
energy,
yeah,
okay?
yeah,
But as we are going either in a near-death experience, when our brain is transmitting from a finite form of perception to the infinite, and we encounter this vast intelligence, we're still interpreting it through a finite filter. And it's
right,
the same thing with religious people. I mean, certainly it's easier for Christians to relate to the person Jesus instead of an infinite electromagnetic field of
yeah,
energy, light. I mean, it's like even quantum physicists. I had this discussion with Dr. Dean Radin, the chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. He goes, Mark, you put 100 quantum physicists together, we can't agree on anything. We
yeah,
know that there is.
yeah,
He said, but we can't even begin to wrap our minds around what this really is.
right, yeah,
So there's nothing wrong with people believing in religions, with this caveat:
right,
nothing spiritual. And you know this, Mike. I know you know this because I've known you long enough. Nothing that comes from a spiritual message, nothing of a spiritual nature, is ever incites or encourages someone to engage in anger,
mm,
bigotry,
yeah,
hatred, or violence.
yeah,
That's a byproduct of the organ of the brain, the
yeah,
ego.
yeah,
Messages from spirits, from the collective
yeah,
consciousness, from the afterlife
yeah,
frequency
yeah,
are about love, healing,
yeah,
resolution.
yeah, yeah, and this is why I think when I've given messages on in platform work, and I know the person's passed, they always give it in a way that doesn't actually come out and say, "Oh, he committed suicide." They just wouldn't do that. They either tell me, "Speak to me after," or they'll give it in such a way that's palatable for the person who's receiving the message, and for the audience to not feel uncomfortable as well. I mean, I agree with. I've seen some psychics that I don't mind people not sugarcoating things, but some of them can be quite brutal. I think that's not very spiritual.
Yeah, and well, that's because their ego's getting
Yeah,
involved,
yeah,
and also it's jumping to
yeah,
conclusions. Um, it's like um, saying that, well, you got to eat broccoli. I'm picking up that you have to eat
yeah,
broccoli because I see broccoli. And then the person goes home and starts eating lots of broccoli and finds out that they're allergic to broccoli and it
yeah,
kills them.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So you don't tell people, say, this is the issue, this is what I'm getting.
yeah,
And yeah, I've seen some people get very nasty with them.
yeah,
Well, your grandmother doesn't like you or whatever. And once again, you don't
yeah,
sugarcoat.
yeah,
You present the evidence and the facts,
yeah.
and then people should draw their own conclusions. We're not here to tell people what to do.
No,
We're like a radio.
yeah,
We're here to be the conduit for the information.
yeah,
We're not here to interject our ego into the process.
correct, yeah. And with regards to frequency, I think you meant I've heard you again speak about the alpha, the beta, the delta. From your experience, the clairs that you use, I know you work with all of them: clairvoyance, clairgustance, clairaudience, clairsentience. Are they on different frequencies as well?
Oh, I think that they might be.
Yeah,
We've got two psychic receptor areas in our body. There's 7 chakras, and it's
yeah.
cool because the Hindus figured this out 5,000 years ago. That the chakras, the 7 chakras, actually align with our 7 endocrine glands.
Wow.
And the 2 psychic receptor areas, one is the solar plexus, which is at the bottom of the rib cage,
Right.
and that is where we get our gut feelings. We always hear about women's intuition,
Yeah.
or for guys, it's got to be gut instinct, because that's more Harrison Ford or Chris
Yeah.
Pratt or Denzel. We get our gut feelings. And the thing about the solar plexus is it's a complex bundle of nerves, the second most complex nerve concentration in our body outside of the cerebral cortex of our
Wow.
brain. And then the pineal gland, which is a small gland, a little bit bigger than a grain of rice, in the center of our forehead, the proverbial
Yeah.
third
Okay.
eye chakra, is where we receive the data,
Right.
the visions, the information, the auditory. And so we have both of these, and everybody has this physiology. It's just that some people are more receptive to it than others, which is why, Mike, when people say, I got a bad feeling, it's in my stomach. Well, yeah, that's a different frequency. Negative events have that
Yeah.
that low, and it's easier to pick up on.
Yeah.
And then the higher frequencies, the data, the intricacies, the medical information are all in different frequencies.
Yeah.
So it's being sent to us at this wave. Okay, that has many layers to it. That's a great question. That's why I love being interviewed by you. You always give me the best questions.
Well, here's another one for you. Hope it lives up to the standard. As a lawyer, you worked in many areas, and one of them was, I think, you worked with medical issues,
Yes.
and so you had to, either by design or default, you developed part of your gift as an evidential medium, information about the body. And so once again, I think there was I heard you talk about the guy, and it took a year for him to discover, but he had a terrible heart condition, and I think you mentioned that he ought to see the doctor. Now, if you want to tell that story, that's great, but is there a different frequency, a different understanding, a different approach, or does that just come in just like it does with everything else?
What happens? Oh, let me clarify. What happened was I was doing a group event, and I was drawn to this gentleman and his wife, and the spirits started targeting him. And I said, "You've got blockages in your heart. You've got to get into a heart doctor right away." And he's like, "Oh, I'm fine," And then I was back at that venue a year later. And he came up to me and he goes, "Can I shake your hand?" And I said, "Well, sure." And his wife was with him. He goes, "You saved my life." And I go, "Well, what did I do?" Because, it was a year, and it was before COVID, and I was on, I would do 20, 30 cities a year. And he said that he explained what happened. And he goes, "My wife made me go to the doctor the next day, and they said, 'Oh my God, you have an erratic heartbeat.' And they sent him to a cardiologist. They said, 'You were on this close to getting a major heart attack,' but they're able to turn it around with medications and changes in diets." So what happens with me is when I'm doing a reading for someone, one of the first things when a spirit connects with me, first I'll get their gender, then they generally will give me symptoms related to their passing. I'll feel how they died. And I notice they do that with me a lot. Some people go, "So why don't they just give you your name?" As well, they very well may, but this is how they work with me. They also know that I have a basic background in anatomy and physiology. I was a personal injury attorney, and I've been reading medical journals and medical reports my whole life. And oftentimes, then the spirit will shift the focus to the person that I'm reading and begin zeroing in on medical issues that they have. But it happens so quick. It'd be nice if they would say, "Okay, we are now shifting over to John Smith over here." It's like that. Or I'll be like telling some lady, she goes, "Well, that doesn't apply to me, but my son has this problem." Okay. And that's because healing is a gift. Healing, and this is what I call, this is one of the concepts from the new book, The Afterlife Frequency, that I refer to as spirit intervention. It's where spirits are intervening to head off at the pass a serious problem or medical condition.
Okay. Just before we go back to the book, what are your thoughts on, here you had the opportunity to be the messenger to save this man's life. But sometimes spirits say, "No, we're not going to give you that information. This man has either got to find this out for himself, or that's it, that's his life." Do you find that there is a real reason for this? Is it their life contract and therefore you won't be told? Because it's complex.
Yeah, I think it's to paraphrase somebody I admire very much, Colonel Dr. John Alexander. He used to be the head of the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And he said the answer to that is as complicated as cancer. But I think what happens is, this is my experience, my belief. There's a day we're coming in and a day we're going out of this life. Now, let's say a spirit intervenes right about here. You're going to continue to live. But let's say you have a stroke, and then you're going to live the remainder of your life in a paralyzed or impaired state. But spirits can intervene to say, "Hey, we're giving you information to avoid this stroke, to avoid this heart attack, to avoid whatever it is." So that is very possibly what they're doing. I remember this story when I was a little kid, and it always scared me. I was like 10 years old when I read this, and it was about this stopwatch, and people would press it and it would give daytime, a minute, like to the exact, it was when you were going to die. Okay. And this young guy figured it out, and it showed that he was going to live to be 97 years old. So he became like this Evel Knievel daredevil doing all this stuff, and he lived through, and then bam, he was in this horrible accident. He lost his arms, his legs, his eyes. He couldn't talk. He was basically wrapped up, and all he could think of is another 64 years like this. And then the end part, the doctor said, "What a strange watch. Every time I click it, it says tomorrow at 11:34 a.m." And I firmly believe, though, that, like you said, our soul contract, our predestination, that there is a time we're coming in and a time we're going
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
and so spirits will intervene to help us with our free will, what
Right.
we do at that time.
Yeah.
And I've yet to have a spirit come through and say, eat more bacon cheeseburgers, more sugary drinks, as much dairy products as you can get into your body. Oh, and by
Yeah.
the way, develop a heroin addiction.
Yeah.
I've I've yet to have that ever
Right.
happen.
Well, your book, Afterlife Frequency, part of it provides hope for victims of grief, survivor's guilt, and suicides. Um, a, a question here for you really is, how do we get people, let's say, who are the atheists, to get comfort from there is an afterlife? Because I still know some people that say, that's it. When it's done, we're finished. People will live with survivor's guilt for quite a long period of time, living in this eternal pain all the time. How does your book deal with that?
Well, survivor's guilt is a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. And there's actually a number of questions in there. With atheists, it's up to them what they believe, and people have a right to believe in nothing. But what I say about atheists, when you put your faith in nothing, expect nothing in return.
Yeah.
Okay, so and agnostics are like, well, I don't believe, but if you give me proof. My dear friend Nancy Evans Bush, who is the world's foremost expert on the hellish NDE,
Right.
and I quote her in the Afterlife Frequency, she said that most near-death experiencers don't believe there's a God. They know.
Right. Yeah.
And it's amazing how people have had an NDE and they physically die and they go into the light and they come back, they cease to be atheists.
Yeah.
Now, the second part of your question deals with the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, and the survivor's guilt. What the Afterlife Frequency does is I try to educate people on the background of the phenomenon, let's say survivor's guilt, but then illustrate it with very either riveting, emotionally gripping, sometimes humorous, believe it or not, stories to illustrate what has happened with other people that my readers can relate to.
Right.
There's no look, we wish we could all go to the Hogwarts of grief, get that magic wand and wham, make people stop grieving or feel guilty. One of the most important things about grief, and this is what the Afterlife Frequency teaches, is that we must become empowered by acknowledging we are powerless to change the fact a loved one has died and how they died.
Right.
Okay? Because we are here now. And while we can't go back in time, we can change how we're reacting to it.
Right. I wonder what your thoughts are on this. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but I had an NDE. I don't think I was really dead, to be quite honest. I was a young kid at the time. So I don't remember. I just remember seeing my body at the end of the bed. But okay, when we go into the spirit world, also it can be daunting for people. As you say, we touched on it, that you exist, you speak either telepathically or however you do, but you lose your body.
Yeah.
This can be a frightening experience for people in itself, I imagine. I mean, I don't know. I think I'm going to be okay with it through the work that I do and what I know. But nonetheless, it seems like, some people might find it very difficult to be absorbed in the energy of everything and exist, but there's nothing for them to see or touch about themselves.
Well, once again, that's those of us in finite form trying to grasp that concept. And I've asked, in links, when I'm in the link with the spirits, and their response is sort of, why do you worry of such things?
Yeah.
They said, when you're here, you will experience it. While you are there, you need to be focusing on what you're doing. And I remember not long after my mother passed, I encountered her spirit, and I said, "I'll never see you in this world again. Your body's gone." And she said, "And it's wonderful, Mark. You'll love it." Okay, because and then I got a glimpse, and and I love when my mother comes through because she was a medium as well,
Yeah.
as was my father, and so they give me wonderful insights. And what happens? They tell me is it is so amazing to feel connected with everything. And on a number of occasions, Mike, usually towards the end of the reading, and I'm glad that they wait till then, when I'm connecting with spirits and people say, well, what's it like being them? They will give me a glimpse of what it feels like. And it's amazing to suddenly feel like you don't have a body and that you're connected with everything everywhere. It's also a phenomenon that NDEers, near-death experiencers, describe as this interconnectedness. And it's exhausting. And the way I described it in my last book, Evidence of Eternity, it's like I'm a single wire, and all of a sudden all the electricity that goes through Manhattan just went through me. Right. Okay? It's an overwhelming sensation. And once again, it is when we are an electromagnetic soul, not tethered to a body, we're part of something greater, and that's wonderful. Yeah. So for people who get all stressed about that, instead of stressing about that, focus on what you're doing here.
Right.
Focus on what you're doing here. Right. And when you get there, then you'll deal with it.
Right. So the afterlife frequency is also partly shows how we can communicate with spirit, and you use the raft technique. You've developed this phrase, and you've got a wonderful story to tell about this with the coins.
Yeah.
So
it's so funny. I was at my computer and I was working on the book, and I was trying to figure how do I explain to people who are not mediums how they can have a mediumistic experience or a psychic experience, and how do they make sense of it? And I was hitting a brick wall. I had writer's block. It just wasn't going to happen. So I thought, all right, let me go for a walk. So I decided to go for a walk towards the beach because I live near the ocean, and I was headed in that direction. All of a sudden, I got that tingly sensation that we get. Yeah. I do an about face, and then I said, all right, I got to go walk on this bike path. So I'm walking down this bicycle path near where I live, and I see these two glowing objects shining in the sun. And I look over, and I go to bend over, and it's a nickel, a 5-cent piece, and a penny, a 1-cent piece. And I hear my mother saying, if they're not heads up, don't touch them, because my mother's family was Italian. They have superstitions for all occasions. And all of a sudden I hear my dad's voice. It's money, grab it. And I'm laughing, because I was hearing my parents, okay? And so I pick them up, and I'm holding these up, and I go, oh, 6 cents. And all of a sudden I go, the 6th sense. And I got those tingles, that electromagnetic tingly sensation. So I said, okay, their souls, their EMSs are touching mine. And then I saw in my mind's eye a vision of my father standing in the ocean holding this blue canvas raft that he used to have. And my dad was a Navy SEAL. He was a scuba diver and a swimming instructor. And I remember that raft. He taught me how to swim, and I was like 2, And all of a sudden I go, raft, recognize, accept, feel, trust. Yeah. The raft technique. It came to me, and that was exactly what my parents were transmitting to me. And so I ran back to the computer, and the words just flew. Pages just flew out of my fingers. And the raft technique teaches everyone, psychics and mediums alike, and non-psychics and non-mediums, how to recognize the signs from spirits, how to accept the experience as real, feel it. Now, that's where people get all snafu'd. Yeah. They stop feeling it, and they begin to hyperanalyze, question it, pick it apart, and then that's the end of it. Yeah. You got to feel it and then trust the message. Yeah. And I also explain to people who've had a near-death experience, or they're part of a deathbed vision where someone's dying and they see the spirits of the person around them, a shared death experience. Raft can be approached, all of that. Right. Because the thing is, Mike, with the afterlife frequency, we have mediumship, visitations, okay, when spirits come to you in a dream or you see them in the corner of your eye or whatever. Near-death experiences, shared-death experiences, deathbed visions have traditionally been studied as separate phenomenon. I do not believe they are separate phenomenon. I believe they're all different forms of the same type of interdimensional communication, which is our electromagnetic soul interfacing with the higher vibration of the afterlife frequency. And so that's why, like when we're talking about mediumship, and I'll go and talk about NDEs and deathbed visions, is because it's all about tuning into higher frequency.
Right. Brilliant. And so, really, I mean, we can look to sort of wrap this up a little bit. But what I wanted to say is that this raft technique, firstly, can help people in their everyday lives. This business of letting go with the flow, trust, offer no resistance, and you'll find things actually work better for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why I developed it. And that was the message from the collective consciousness that my parents were the ambassadors for. Because people think, Mike, and I know that you've experienced this because you used the term collective consciousness. The other side's a collective. Think of it as an ocean, and each spirit in it is a drop of water. Okay. And so that's why when a spirit comes forward, they're going to give us information that may have far exceeded anything they knew in this world, because they're energetically linked with this cosmic internet. So my parents were conveying to me, this is how to help people make sense of these experiences without immediately assuming it's evil, immediately blocking it, immediately denying it. And that's also why I said earlier that when you employ the raft technique, the messages are about healing, love, resolution, peace. They are never about inciting anyone to acts of anger, bigotry, hatred, or violence.
And on your website, afterlifefrequency.com, there's a resource there for people that they can look at to help them in the various aspects of grief.
Yes.
Super.
Yeah, the grief management section, it's a free resource. I encourage anyone coping with the loss of a loved one to go to my website, afterlifefrequency.com. Please sign up for my newsletter so you'll be up to date on when I'm doing shows with Mike and other shows. Also, if you're interested in scheduling a session with me, it's all there at my website, afterlifefrequency.com. And also you can order my book through that as well, all three of my books.
Super.
So, Mike, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy our time together. It just goes by like that.
You're welcome. And you got a little poem because you've experienced a loss recently.
I do. A very, very dear friend of mine, to many of us, her name was Shirley Ballstock, and she lived in Denver. Her parents were Holocaust survivors. They were Jewish, and they survived being in Nazi death camps, but the rest of her family was murdered. And she passed recently after a long struggle with breast cancer. And Shirley was not just a gifted medium and psychic. She was also a numerologist and a poet. And so, Mike, she asked a friend of hers, she wrote this as she was dying of cancer, and she said, the day I die, go ahead and post this on my Facebook page. This is what I want to leave behind. And what she said was, or what wrote, if you are not famous to the writer, you will not be written about. History books do not play fair and will only embellish its favorites. Instead, write your legacy upon the seeds of love that you plant. Then the ground will celebrate you. The wind will whisper your name. The rain will nourish your seed and cause it to grow. The sun will spread your light, and your descendants will be the flowers and the trees. God will then write about the seeds of love you planted upon the sky and embellish love upon your descendants. Creator is the author. Your soul is the pen. Your spirit is eternal. Pages become brittle in the history books of the ages. We become desperate to save the stories that are passing into dust. Time waits for no one. You are the story of the life you live. Plant everything with love and the seed called you will grow and change the world. You will then become famous to the writer. We are, you are, I am. Activate.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was Shirley Ballstock, an amazing, amazing woman, and I've already felt her presence around me.
Right.
And she said that it's even better than we think it is. So, thank you,
Wonderful.
Shirley.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And so, just to wrap this up, you've just done a online IANS conference. Is that available on replay for people to see?
Yeah. Absolutely. If they visit the website iands.org, International Association for Near-Death Studies.org, it's the 2021 online conference, and my talk was entitled The NDE Zone, Connected by the Light from the Cosmic to the Subatomic.
I'm sure
And
there's a movie in there somewhere, Mark.
well, what did they say? I don't know. It was a slogan for a TV station. Every life is a story, and
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It's true.
And your podcast, where can they find your weekly podcast?
Go to transformationnetwork.com. Also, if you go to my website, afterlifefrequency.com, if you just scroll down the homepage, you'll see a section called The Psychic and the Doc. My co-host is Dr. Pat Basili, a world-renowned behavioral psychologist. So people call in. We have different guests on the show, and I hope to get you on there, Mike, as well. And so we interview interesting guests, and then some shows are call-in shows where I'll do a mini reading, and then Dr. Pat adds her insights.
Right.
And that's The Psychic and the Doc.
Psychic and the Doc. Okay, perfect. As I say, I've read your books. They are not just ordinary books written by an ordinary medium. They are actually special. In fact, I've got it written here. There's a wonderful review by Gary Schwartz, one of the experts in the afterlife experiments. To put it bluntly, he says this is an amazing book which deserves to be enjoyed by millions of readers, and I'm sure it will, Mark. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mike. And to all your listeners, many blessings. And remember, we are in charge of our life, and so make the most positive choices you can in the time that's given you. Thank you again, Mike. God bless you.